Okay, here's our very first podcast of the year for Anatomy and Physiology. And in this part of Chapter 1, we're going to be taking a look at what anatomy and physiology is and what we're going to be studying throughout the year. So anatomy is where we're going to study the parts of the body. So anatomy oftentimes was going to concentrate on the different organs and all the different pieces and aspects that make up the body. Which really, it's called morphology, and it requires a lot of memorization. The more interesting side of anatomy and physiology to me is the physiology side of it, which is the function of all of these parts. What do each of the parts do, and how do they work together to keep your body healthy? So to understand the physiology side of A&P, we're going to take a look at what is it that your body needs to be able to do in order to stay healthy. And these are the characteristics of human life. So your internal parts especially need to be able to move, like that your heart needs to be able to beat, you need to be able to move food through your digestive system. So movement is an important characteristic of human life. Irritability is your ability to sense changes of what's going on and then react to those changes. So if you eat something that's really bad for you, or like not bad for you, but has bacteria in it or something, your body actually can sense that and then make you get rid of it by making you throw up. Growth, increasing body size. You don't stay the size of an infant forever. Reproduction is actually really important for the survival of the human species, not necessarily for the survival of an individual. So not everybody is capable of reproducing, but as a species we are. Respiration is a key component to what we'll be talking about this year, and this is getting oxygen and using it to get energy from food. You cannot get enough energy from your food without oxygen. So the reason we need oxygen is actually to get energy from food. Digestion is how we're actually going to get the chemicals that we need from the foods that we eat and then get rid of the waste substances. So we do some digestion. Absorption, getting all of the food that we digested into our body fluids, into our individual cells where those nutrients can be used. Circulation, very important piece. We have to move everything throughout the body. So the different substances that are going to get moved throughout the body, the oxygen and the food, glucose and stuff like that, all your waste products, hormones, everything that needs to get moved to different places in the body happen because of circulation. Assimilation, we take in a lot of different kinds of chemicals from food and from the things that we drink, everything that we take in, including the things we breathe in. A lot of times we need to be able to change these into different chemical substances, and these are all the different chemical reactions that we do, and we assimilate them and make them into things that we can use. So like we take in nitrogen through the food that we eat, and we have to make that into amino acids that we can then use to make proteins. So that whole process is called assimilation. And then excretion, we have to be able to get rid of waste products. If we don't get rid of waste products, they'll build up in the body and the body won't be able to function anymore. So what do we do to maintain life? We all have the ability to do metabolism, and metabolism, a lot of times people think of metabolism as your ability to break down food and how good you are at it. But really metabolism is all of the different chemical changes that happen in the body, all of the different chemical reactions that happen, and there's a lot that go on in the body. In order for you to have a healthy metabolism, you have 4 basic bodily needs. You must take in food, oxygen, water, and you must maintain heat. We're warm-blooded, so we can't let our body temperature fall too low. As long as we have these 4 things and we have our working metabolism, we are able to maintain homeostasis. Remember, homeo means same. So keeping our body in a stable internal environment, a sameness, that is the key to our health. And so everything that we talk about and how all our organs work is so that we can stay in homeostasis. All right, so when we talk about the body, we actually have lots of levels of organization within the body. We start out, we're made of individual atoms, the 6 major atoms that you find in living things. If you remember this from biology, you have CHNOPS, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. There's also other ones like calcium and potassium, things like that. But those atoms come together and they are going to make molecules and compounds. And those are going to make up your cells. which make up your, make up your organelles, which will make up your cells. Groups of cells or tissues. You get all of your different tissues coming together, they'll make your different organs, and then the different organs work together to make your organ systems. So let's take a quick look at that. So a group or mass of cells working together to carry out a common function is called a tissue. So we will do a chapter on tissues. There's 4 major types of tissues. You have connective, nervous, muscle, and epithelial. So we'll take a look at those different kinds of tissues. You take the different kinds of tissues and they all work together to carry out a certain function. You now have an organ. And then a group of organs form all of your different organ systems. So we'll be going over many of the different organ systems throughout the year. Now, when we talk about the body, it actually gets organized in a certain way. There's 2 portions where that we can kind of separate it. Your axial portion is kind of like the axis of the earth. So that is your head, your spinal column, and your rib cage. That makes up your axial portion. So we call this portion right here your trunk. When we look at it here, so the trunk of the body, and then you have your neck and your head. And then you have your appendicular portion, which are your arms and legs. So these are your appendages, and that's why they call it the appendicular. So anything that's connected to your axial portion is your appendicular portion. Now, within the body, there are several different body cavities, so we'll take a look at those. There are layers of membranes within these cavities. And when we talk about all of the different organs that are now inside those cavities, we call those organs your viscera. Okay, so all of the organs that are within your different cavities in your body make up your viscera. These are your visceral organs, so that is, your intestines, your stomach, your heart, all of those things are considered your viscera, and they're found within the different cavities, and they're inside of membranes. So we'll take a look at how that is structured. All right, so your body cavities, you have some major body cavities. The 2 biggest body cavities, the way we look at them, is your dorsal and your ventral. Dorsal means back. So your dorsal body cavity right here are the body cavities that are at the back. So there's the cranial cavity, which has your brain inside of it. And then you have your vertebral cavity, which has your spinal cord inside of it. So those 2 make up your dorsal. Your ventral body cavity is anything that's towards the front of the body. Because dorsal means back. Think of a dorsal fin on a shark. And then ventral is front. So your ventral body cavity is made up of your thoracic cavity that has your heart and lungs inside of it. Your abdominal cavity contains all of your digestive organs, and then your pelvic cavity contains your bladder, your reproductive organs, and your organs needed for producing waste, like the rectum. Separating the thoracic and the abdominal cavities is your diaphragm. Okay, so you want to make sure you get each of these labeled within your notes there. So another view that we can take of the body cavities is from the front. So this is taking a look at the ventral body cavity right here. So again, you have your thoracic up here, and then you have your abdominal and your pelvic down here. So at the top in yellow here, you have your cranial cavity again, and your vertebral cavity. It's also called your spinal cavity. So those are parts of your dorsal. Then when we look at our other cavities, in here we can break them down a little bit more. So this whole area right here that I'm circling is your thoracic cavity. And that's actually separated into a couple different parts. Your pleural cavity is right here. That contains your lungs. And then your pericardial cavity right here, that's your heart. So that's where you would find your heart. And then you have your diaphragm separating them. And then all together, a lot of times we will call this lower cavity the abdominopelvic cavity, because it's made of both the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. So you've got both of them in there, separated by the diaphragm. There's not really actually a clear separation between these 2 cavities. So a lot of times they're combined into one, called the abdominopelvic cavity. The superior mediastinum, which is up here, is basically where your sternum is. And it kind of covers and comes down over the heart, just to give you another little piece of separation in there. Okay. Now, all of these cavities are actually surrounded by membranes. So all of the organs are surrounded by membranes, and it's actually a two-layered membrane system, and these are called serous membranes. So there's an outer membrane and an inner membrane. It's kind of like double bagging groceries. If you ever get groceries from the store and you have something that's really heavy in the bag, they'll put two bags in there. This is what our organs are in a similar type of system. So the outer layer is called parietal layer. Parietal means outer. And that typically forms the lining that is against the wall of the cavity. So you have all of these body cavities, and there is a lining of tissue all against the outside of those cavities. Then inside you have another layer that is surrounding each of the organs. They get their own little membrane surrounding them, and that's called the visceral layer. And between those two layers, you will have another cushion of liquid. Okay? So between the layers of each membrane is a lubricating fluid that's called serous fluid. So basically that's going to keep friction from occurring. So you've got a bag going around the outside, then you have your organs that are inside their own bags, and in between those two layers you have fluid. And so that fluid keeps the organs from rubbing up against the sides of the parietal lining. Okay, so this is what this would look like down here. If you look at this little lung, here's your pleural, or your parietal layer, and then that's kind of surrounding, that would be out against the outside of the thoracic cavity, and then the lung itself here has its own layer called the visceral layer. Now, different parts of your body have different names for their membranes. So pleural or pleural refers to the lungs. So this picture is showing you that the outer layer is called the parietal pleura, and the inner layer is called the visceral pleura. Okay. You also have layers that surround your heart. That's the pericardium. So the outer layer is the parietal pericardium, so that would go right against the cavity outside of the heart, and then the inner layer is the visceral pericardium, which actually attaches itself pretty much directly to the heart, giving it added protection. And then your entire abdominal pelvic cavity also has a section of membranes. So the peritoneum is this large membrane that surrounds all the organs within the abdominal pelvic cavity. So it's kind of like all of your organs are in a big bag, and then they all have their own separate bags within there.